Hello and welcome to the New World Review, where we may be at the point of battle and maybe the loss of a certain key traumatized character, or two, who knows with this show. What we do know is that there are some children with a lot of learning to do, so sit back, relax with Biscuit's cookie, and let's do a little regrouping, because yeah. Episode 90 was a very cerebral episode all about perception of the world and perception of others, and we can go into each character pretty easily and quickly and learn a few things about them, so I'm gonna do a little of that. Though I want to say that I am a huge fan of the static that replaced the placement of Killwa's eye for many reasons. So let's get into it and I'll come back to it maybe. Probably. Maybe not. I can be fickle. I'm a fickle beast like that. We started out with Gon and Knuckle fighting. Gon, who works on instinct, is being forced to fight that instinct more than the physical attacks. His decision making up to now has been instinctive and immediate, and it's sort of his hallmark. In order for him to think clearly about things, he needs to sit down and sit with them, or at least be knocked out by the situation, possibly metaphorically knocking the sense into him in the process. He's all impulse, all adrenaline, and he's so attuned to that it makes sense that he would immediately realize what's happening to him when a little Mr. Mime creepy bank teller turns up to repossess his nen. Which is funny. I fully understand why he didn't want to deal with the numbers. The second Knuckles started to reel them off, I tried to keep up at first and then gave up on it entirely, fairly quickly. I think I even visually disconnected by the end because while I'm very capable of dealing with numbers, I don't engage in anything at all for fun that uses numbers that way. I'm happy to explain mechanically what I'm doing when I work on impulse because I've had to learn how to break things down to explain to people who just don't understand why I'm doing the things that I do or how it bears any relevance to what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean I want that in my visual media. If I'd been younger and actually paid attention, I'm fairly sure looking at those numbers and the interest rates that became exponential over time would have been possibly better money handling training than I ever received at school, purely because it is animated and relevant to life. But we already knew halfway in how much Gon was taking in of this explanation, and in fact, by episode 90 we knew before he started to explain it how Gon would react to this explanation, and so my only conclusion for it taking so long to explain has to be that Togashi wanted us to feel what Gon felt. Anyway, now Gon has to learn to think very strategically rather than his standard MO of punch it and it goes away. And that's what Knuckle was talking about with Gon's weaknesses. In a world where it takes time to load up your attack, someone using time against you becomes a very dangerous prospect. This isn't Dragon Ball Z. This is not a situation where people will stand around and go, "What? All that power?" in a very Vegeta-like way. Gon is now in a situation where he has to learn how to measure his attacks as well as how and where they land in absolute terms. In the past, he would just use it until it burned out and he collapsed. The consequences here are very real because not only are there immediate consequences, there are long-term ones that mean he won't be able to achieve his overall goal. It was a nice reminder at the end of the episode that the Queen Ant is still eating and her son is due any day now. It was more subtle than taking us to a puppeted kite and less subtle than showing us what all their trainers are up to. So I appreciated that. Speaking of trainers, Knuckles' softness with Gon has been notable throughout the last few episodes, and it's good to see him deciding that Gon is now worthy of his attention. It's an interesting decision from Togashi to have a real soft personality who loves animals but is a nen accountant giving non-consensual loans to others in order to weaken them. It's a horrifically accurate assessment of corporations when you think about it. Look at this beautiful thing I do with one hand. Now I will attack you with kindness. Don't forget to pay all the interest. Yeah, I'd have learned a lot back in the 90s. Speaking of learning, in this episode, both preteens are learning how to engage in fights in the opposite way. Gon has long fought offensively, willing to take a hit if it means he'll get one in. A solid strategy, though I don't think he's ever thought about it. Meanwhile, we have our flight risk Killua trying to deal with the curse on him to keep his feet on the ground and stand for something. One of the things I've been trying to gauge with this episode is whether the curse is physical or magical or purely psychological. I wonder whether it's Nen binding him or repeated trauma from Illumi, basically, and now I'm loving the name Illumi because what he's done is potentially illuminate the instinctive defensiveness Killua naturally has. Even looking at the first frame of the end credits as I am, because I paused to make a note and ended up just writing, we can see that Gon is looking out into the world while Killua's looking inside himself. There's a melancholy, a drawn-in nature to Killua that I wonder, being someone deeply interested in identity and personality, whether Killua has simply been positively reinforced to behave in protective mode rather than trained to do so. He's not an extrovert, or hasn't been presented as such. That's definitely gone, and he's willing to try to fight for his place by Gon's side, but something stops him, repeatedly. And it seems like literally. Something I've always been interested in is Killwa's amazement that Gon is asking the questions he asks. It never occurs to me that Killua doesn't ask the questions because he can't. I assumed that the differences in personality were to do with differences in thought pattern and the fact that Killua actually does think about the potential consequences for his actions. But now I'm wondering whether he holds the questions in because there are extra consequences if he voices them. And it's not just that he's deciding to voice the questions he's afraid to voice, but who he's going to voice it to. He's about to ask someone we know is a coward. The fight between Shoot and Killua is perfect because anything we learn about one is counterbalanced by what we learn of the other. Both are cowards, but in the opposite direction. Let me explain because I don't know if that's clear. On the one hand, we have Killua, who could very easily kill Shoot, but can't because something in him is telling him his continued existence is worth more than the shame or loss of anything in the world, even the most important thing in the world to him, Gon. On the other hand, we have Shoot, who I don't think could beat Killua in any other situation and can only be as strong as he currently is because of the condition he's placed on himself that forces him to be brave and to remove his ability to empathize. One is trying to disengage with his brain and focus on his body. The other is trying to disengage with his body and focus on his brain, and that's fascinating, isn't it? And the worst part is really that if Killua asks the right question, it would force Shoot to engage with his brain and potentially stop him from being able to use his Nen abilities, and I love that conundrum. I love not knowing the outcome of that. I love the possibility. But if Killua wins this way, is it a win or a loss? Is he winning because he managed to make himself vulnerable and in doing so drop the defensive posture that protects him? Or is he losing because his method of winning is socially rather than physically driven, and the ants don't care about being social? They just want to kill you and eat you. So those are the thoughts that run through my mind when I watch combat like this, because ultimately we have to see each battle as having intrinsically character developing concepts, or it's just a series of punches, and that's kind of boring after a while, no matter how they're animated. The level of depth in this show is phenomenal, almost because it can make me think like this, and it's what I enjoy about it more than anything. Let's see how things shake out in episode 91. Episode 91, and this was another big brain episode. Despite all the emotional situations and emotions that could have been engaged, the episode did not make me cry at all, which is unusual. From my perspective and the way that I understand my own emotions and my own emotional responses to things, I don't think this episode was designed to pull at my heartstrings. It was designed for me to see how the structure and status of characters is changing, and that was the true intention. The episode wasn't constructed for tears, it was constructed for thought. We didn't go through enough of the emotional turmoil to feel the way Gon and Killua or Colt did, but we did go through enough in the last episode to meet them at the right place emotionally in the aftermath. I'm actually very happy we didn't have to watch the failure. In fact, is this the first time there's been a major failure? There was another during the Hunter exam, Killwa's. I wonder whether we'll see flashbacks of Killwa's experience the way we did last time, or if that'll be the end of it. The construction of the series is really quite interesting in this way. Despite the show being very action to drive change, it's been very reactive overall and focused on the idea of supporting others. This episode leaned strongly into family, friends, and how we decide what we need and what we want. Neither Gon nor Killua could learn what they needed to in the time they were given, and so now they must sit back and wait to learn from others, or give up and leave. I don't know whether they have a choice. I don't know whether Killua will have a choice but to leave. It makes sense. There had to be a time eventually where the children would have to be children. They would have to experience failure and setback. And that's part of the constructive narrative that interests me, because now we're in a position where we know more than the protagonists, know that they can't do anything to change the outcome at present, and where we're actually, by necessity, shifting who the protagonists are. We're being forced to question what worth means in so many contexts. Who is worthy of fighting ants? Who is worth the king's energy? How does one prove they are worthy to a new organism? How does one prove they're worthy to their friends? How will Killua tell Gon he's leaving, and how will his method of doing that affect Gon's confidence in himself? I imagine he'll drop the frustrated tears and go to anger, because that's what he's done in the past, but it's really unclear as to whether that will actually happen. The dam broke for Gon. He's believed in his abilities up to now, and his inability to be flexible is his downfall. Now that he's facing this, the way he can choose to come back to it
might be humility or giving up and trying to fight it another way, or he can keep running into a wall. I'm not sure which he'll choose, but I can't wait to see which he does, because seeing how people act in difficult circumstances is generally the point of media. We want to see people battle, face consequences, and learn to be better. We want to see our heroes win. Not that we know whether or not Gon is a hero, just that we want to see the heroes win, whoever they are. If we compare Gon and Colt, green themed in artwork as well, has hair that's up but has big ol' angel wings. And he's another child in a difficult situation who cares about his mother and has taken the opposite path. Rather than trying to fight his way through every situation, he's trying to negotiate with the enemy to find a way to help those he cares about. Colt is the anti-Gon, really. If Gon's a psychopath who needs to learn to feel empathy, Colt's the empath who needs to learn to fight for what he believes in, surrendering himself and his colony to protect the Queen. What does he think will happen when the Queen's safe? Yes, it means the Order reasserts itself and the ants don't entirely take over the world, which would be very easy to do in this circumstance where they don't fight back. But would she be able to go against her own biology to resist the king? Finally, the king is born and he has his hat and his little jacket and he's Cell. Like, at least one iteration of Cell. They're very certainly related. Him and Frieza. Like, if Frieza and Cell had a baby, that would be him. Same energy as well. All the other ants are food, and the book on the floor, and kindness, and special breeding, and family are all dead now because the king's there. I wasn't surprised when Pitou wouldn't help the queen. Their only concern is the king, and he's proven he could quite easily kill them all in that colony, so, you know, duh. Having watched Colt going to get help, he knew absolutely already exactly where Colt was going. It's funny that Colt knew exactly where to go on that point where the others were lazing. It suggests they were not hidden all that well. We have a revolution to perform without our original protagonists, any of them, and Colt knew where the most powerful of them that we've seen were hidden. Welp. I'm excited to see more of the story, but I'm even more excited to see how it's told, because it's a bit of a subversion of narrative at this point, and I like that. It's got a vibe of Game of Thrones, but without a great deal of the gratuity and violence and character perspectives. Though as I make my way through, I'm seeing the numbers and thinking I might be just as disappointed by the ending, so I guess let's hope more episodes are in the making by the time I finish this series. I doubt it, but we can dream, right? Maybe that's what makes the brain so tasty. Speaking of tasty, time for me to go eat. So that's it from me. If you enjoyed the deep, dark insights I provided into this light fairground of horror, feel free to like, subscribe, share, do all the good stuff, and I'll see you next time.